Sarah, and thanks Kate and Jera and Rick for your reports on the things that are seriously happening around us. Which brings us to our main program today on art and activism. It's the beginning of a series of conversations we hope to have with visual artists today and ultimately musicians, writers, etc. So basically, I'd like to say everyone on this Zoom has asked themselves in the last, well, for quite some time, what can you do? Where should you put your energies during this challenging time? And it's the thing that brings us to this Zoom. It's the thing that brings us out on the streets to peacefully protest and to bear witness to the daily attacks on our democracy and our neighbors. So the three artists I've invited to join us today are each in their own way trying to address the same questions in terms of personal responsibility through their art practice and their community outreach. So I'm going to tell you about them and we're going to look at some of their work. You want to back it up, Tom? Oh, was that the next slide? No, I guess we didn't change it. Doesn't matter. Many of you have seen Margot Burian's large-scale outdoor exhibit called Ordinary Magic. It ran for a year at outside the Glen Arbor Arts Center. They were her original collages that were reproduced on five-foot square aluminum panels and then auctioned off to support the Arts Center. It's really beautiful. The last, back it up, back up again. We must have lost some slides. Okay, just put Margot's slide back up. That's great. Leave it there. Since graduating, I'll tell you when to change the next slide, Tom, okay? Since graduating with a BFA from Kendall College of Art and Design, Margot's worked as a freelance illustrator with many national and regional clients, including American Greetings and McGraw-Hill Publishing. She said she finds the crossover from being an illustrator to being a fine artist a natural one. And having spent much of her youth in northern Michigan, she has a great love for the serenity and beauty of the woods and the big lake, and it's represented time and time again in her beautiful oil paintings and collage. But more recently, Margot has spearheaded the exhibit proposal, We Will Not Whisper, which is a response to the Project 2025 judgment on women and their roles in society. We'll hear about that more later, but if you want to see Margot's work, it can be seen in galleries here in Traverse City, Harbor Springs, Grand Rapids, and starting on Friday the 18th at Center Gallery in Glen Arbor. Next slide, please. Sarah Barrett-Neal, who is our next artist, graduated from Michigan State University in 1978 with a BFA in studio art, and since 1999 has maintained a studio practice focused on contemporary quilt, excuse me, and collage. Now, contemporary quilts differ from traditional quilts because there is no pattern to follow. Next slide, please. So Sarah's practice honors the tradition of creative stitching and sewing, but her work interprets current political moments through the juxtaposition of unexpected materials. This piece here, the button war, you can see the little buttons hanging down, but it's in response to that pissing match that happened during the first Trump administration when he and Kim Jong-un were, thumping their chests and threatening to push their big buttons. So Sarah's work has been seen in the past at Lake Street Galleries, the Denos Museum, the Muskegon Art Museum, Buckham Gallery in Flint, and the Ramsdell Regional Center of Arts in Manistee. But for the last 15 years, Sarah's worked in gallery management and is the gallery manager at the Glen Arbor Arts Center. And in that capacity, she has helped to grow the local art community and brought much added relevance to exhibits and programs at GAC. And in the upcoming exhibit, His Story, Her Story, Whose Story, you'll see evidence of that as she asks the visual question, who gets to tell whose story? Nick Burkhart, our third artist, is an interdisciplinary artist who teaches painting at Northwestern Michigan College and is the father of two delightful girls. He works in various media, including painting, carving, and drawing on canvas, paper, and wood, and explores how we symbolize and interpret natural phenomenon encountered in our environment. Next slide. In his monochromatic renderings of abandoned orchards and the changing landscape, Nick considers how land is used, how agriculture is practiced, and how we physically and psychologically inhabit those spaces. The mural he created for the Fouch Trailhead, Wigwasi Jiman, is a large-scale digital print on aluminum panel, and it celebrates the history of the region, specifically Anishinaabe canoe craftsmanship, and the relationship between communities and nature. It was a collaboration between the Tart Trails, the Traverse Band of Odawa and Chippewa Indians, the Leelanau Historical Society Museum, and Image 360 Traverse City. Nick has a BA in studio art from Hope College and is represented by V Gallery in Omena and currently featured at Crooked Tree Art Center's Wooden Earthen exhibit in Traverse City. I, for those that don't know, am Carrie Betlin Eder, and moderating this conversation. I'm an active member of Leelanau Indivisible and a sculptor working in whatever materials are at hand. I use paper, wood, plastic, metal, you name it. If it gets thrown out, I find it. It's usually an attempt to keep some of that, excuse me, out of the waste stream. And it explores themes, all sorts of themes, but mostly it's about reuse and revisioning of objects that are discarded or ignored, and they ultimately inform or underlie whatever the resulting artwork is. I've exhibited in galleries in Chicago, Brooklyn, New York, St. Paul, Minnesota, and here at the Denos Museum, Glen Arbor, Crooked Tree, and Oliver Art Centers. Mostly, I'm curious about process, and right now, how creative process is being impacted by what's happening around us. So to begin, we'll go back to seeing everybody who's assembled here. And I'm going to ask our artists to respond to the question. So unmute yourselves. Nick, there's Nick, and Sarah, and Margot. I know Margot's here somewhere. She's there. What is the value of art in a time like this? Why do we make art? And what do you want to say with it? Let's start with Sarah.
Thanks, Carrie. I think about this so much. There's so many different ways to talk about the world, and I really like the arts, all of them, because they give us they give us very powerful tools and a vocabulary that makes hard, difficult situations a little bit more accessible in so many different ways. Um, in any art process, there's a process of interpretation. It's kind of like eating food. You chew it up and you digest it, and then something comes out from that. And that's an important thing because lots of times people don't want the hard facts. They would like something interpretive that helps them ease into an idea, maybe consider it from another perspective.
So having even the inherent beauty and style of something makes it easier to get to and interpret however they need to. What do you think, Margot?
Well, I think when someone is engaging with a piece of art, and yes, I think you can be drawn in by the beauty or the technique or the style, but when someone engages with a piece of art, it becomes more personal. And one of the things in especially in my early years, and I've always made small works because it forces the viewer to become intimate. You have to lean into it and you have to look closely. You know, a ginormous piece of art on the wall is pretty easy to glance at and walk away from. But when the art is small and intimate, you have to push into the space. So you become more activated, I think, in some ways with the art. And I think that gives artists in general a powerful tool to make statements about what's going on around them.
Yeah, like that. Nick, got anything to add at this point?
I think in addition to what they've said, I think art is an opportunity to learn and engage and focus your attention in different ways that you don't otherwise do. Um, Sort of along the lines of what Sarah said about offering a different vocabulary. But it also allows you to highlight or bring attention to things that might not be otherwise considered or represented in our everyday life. And so I think that can be a space of learning as a arts practitioner and engaging in making art, but also as a audience or viewer coming to an art exhibit or an artist talk. You can open yourself up to new ideas and consider things that you haven't seen or thought about before.
Thank you. So Margot, we've talked in the past about this since the election, how you've been processing everything that's happened and what evolved in terms of your proposal. Would you tell us something about that?
Yeah, so I've always been someone who uh never been really very politically active, honestly. And um after the election, I was so shocked and dismayed, disappointed, horrified by the fact that I honestly didn't believe that he would be elected again. And so I have a friend who's been very vocal all along online about what's been going on. And I'm just giving you that framework just because I'm going to get to that in a second. And she's about 100 pounds soaking wet and just this tiny, fierce little force. And so I completely had to shut out and tune out because I'm someone who can't make work from a place of disharmony. I've always been someone who makes work from a very calm, centered space. And I didn't feel calm. I didn't feel centered. And in early January, there was an article that just happened across my feed about how Meta platforms were changing what they defined as hate speech. And some of those changes were including the fact that women could be referred to as household objects, as possessions, that people of color could be referred to as inanimate objects, and that people who identify as LGBTQ could be referred to as it. And that just infuriated me. And I just was absolutely heartbroken about it and thought, okay, if my friend who weighs 100 pounds soaking wet can post all over online about how angry she is about this, if I don't stand up for what I think is right, then who will? And so that this was the question that I was asking myself, and how can I best do that? So my idea was to organize an exhibition and invite 27, well, at this point, 27 women have been invited to create work for this exhibition. And the exhibition is called We Will Not Whisper, and it deals with how Project 2025 is effectively, or well, I don't want to say effectively, but how they're trying to silence large groups of people by dehumanizing them through the use of freedom of speech or lack of freedom of speech. What I found, I've submitted the proposal to one venue, but what I found is I think it's going to be a hard sell to get this work shown.
You're getting pushback
Yeah,
from,
I'm getting pushback because arts organizations are afraid of losing funding. And so we're still going to push on with this, but it's it's a little more daunting than I thought it would be to get the work shown. So I have a couple more ideas as far as who the pitch will be sent out to and who the proposal will be made to. And yeah, so we're kind of at that point, but it was interesting. I only had one person who declined the invitation.
Mm.
But pretty much when I had the proposal written and it was sent out, every single woman was on board and they were solid yeses. So it tells me that the work needs to be done, the exhibition needs to be shown, and yeah, yeah. But it's interesting because, I was very, up until I found a reason to, I shouldn't say a reason. I guess I was so infuriated and like, what can I do? What's within my sphere? And then if not me, then who? So that's
Exactly.
kind of the impetus for
Right.
pulling this together.
Right. And in your daily practice of uh, landscapes and barns and beautiful things, how's that going?
So now it's going well. I participated in the in the Facebook boycott, on the Meta boycott, and got myself off Facebook for about 3 weeks completely, cold turkey, which I would say I was doing a lot of doom scrolling and being a little too plugged into what was happening, which was making me despondent and unable to work because all of it coming at us is just so enormous. And so right now I'm at about a 5-minute limit per day, and I'm holding my ground on it because I think that, and from the reading I've been doing about some of these social media platforms, is their goal is to divide and separate us. And I find that me being off social media is much better for my mental health. I'm able to create. I have a show coming up which opens next week. I feel like I've made some of the strongest work. In my own opinion, I feel like I've made some of the strongest work I've made in years,
Mm.
which is exciting. But it also tells me that we need to limit our exposure to social media because I am now able to focus. I'm an avid or was an avid reader. And so I think we have to focus on community, the things that count, stand up where we can, and stay off social media for the most part.
I think everybody's kind of struggling with that these
Yeah.
days, how to. And in its place, I like to think that we are creating community through Indivisible and in the various venues where we see art and make art. And Sarah is the great proponent of that. As a quilter, she brings together all of these different materials to create an art, but she also brings together different people and different kinds of art to establish ideas about women or how we think and how we take in information, the various shows that since I've known her, she's curated over the last few years. And Sarah, could you talk a bit about your efforts on community building and the show that's about to come up?
Sure. Um, I'm the luckiest person on the face of the planet. I have a great day job. when the Glen Arbor Arts Center asked me to create this exhibitions program back in 2017, it gave me an opportunity to do so many things I wanted to do for a long time. The primary thing was being a place where we could explore ideas and to get as many people involved in responding to creative prompts and questions and coming up with visual solutions. When I'm planning exhibitions, it's probably a year and a half process out. And so more than a year ago, I started thinking about voices and who writes history and whose voices aren't being heard. A lot of this kind of thinking I do when I'm out walking in the morning. So I just keep on mulling around ideas. And from that mulling came the exhibition that we're going to open in the middle of August called History, Her Story, Whose Story. And I asked people to think about and respond to things like, um, who's in charge of telling the story, whatever the story is, whose voices aren't being heard. And I wanted people to not necessarily land on political things, but look across the universe and into their own lives and try to figure out what in their lives would give them an opportunity to respond to these questions. I, in my quilt making, have a great opportunity to talk about voice all the time. Quilt making, as people are probably so used to hearing, is something that's associated with the home. It's traditionally done by women. It's utilitarian, and everybody has a relationship with a quilt. But in the 60s, studio artists started embracing the quilt as an object and a process. And quilts got reeled into doing other kinds of work besides keeping people warm. So in my quilt making, I get to talk about, I'm sorry, my brain is going away. I get to talk about how we think about these things. Why do we think that they're objects that can be moved to the one side because women make them? We can examine that. So much in the visual art world, painting is at the top of the heap. And then all things are defined by painting. So you'll hear people say, I paint with fabric. And I don't believe that painting is the only way for us to define what we're doing. So in my quilt making and in this upcoming exhibition, I'm going to be talking about why do we have these divisions in materials? And why are some materials given a bigger voice than others? So you can kind of see where I'm going with that.
Yeah, we can apply that to life and our, sort of divisive relationships across the country. Why is it so hard to put, black and white? Or, where is the color? I think that's there's just a lot of layers to that. I really appreciate it.
Can I add one thing? And it's a very
Please.
short thing.
Please do.
Back in the earlier part of this century, when I was still writing letters, right after 9/11, I got a letter from a friend of mine who is a hand weaver. And she said in this letter, I feel like the work I'm doing is so unnecessary, so ridiculous in the face of what just happened.
Right.
And I turned around and I wrote her right back. I said, au contraire, what you're doing is very important because creative work is life affirming. And I have felt that way ever since that exchange is the arts are life affirming. So for me, that's my go-to for talking about the world, protesting. Other people find it, their go-to is being able to go stand with a group and be a presence. I think that it's so important for us to keep on reminding people that creativity is a life-affirming activity and it's just not a hobby.
And it's available to everybody. Everybody
Exactly.
here, can cut and paste, grab a crayon, a marker, and just let loose for 5 minutes, and it does help. It really does. And someone who knows a lot about that because he's got two girls that he's helping to see the value in all of this is Nick, who is a teacher as well as a father and an artist. And he has a particular relationship to um, the land and wood. And we tease him about being the dead wood guy because he does beautiful monochromatic paintings of orchards in disarray and trees just putting that last bloom out to stay alive. And there's something really inherently strong and wonderful about all that I'd like you to tell us about because I know you have lots to say about it.
Sure. Yeah. I think where I'd like to start is just kind of piggybacking on the introduction to Indivisible and when you put up the land acknowledgement. I think my goal as an artist is to seek to know the place and the longstanding history of this land and this area. As somebody who has grown up in northern Michigan, I grew up north of Petoskey between Pellston and Brutus, so a very small area. I grew up on a farm of 100 acres and uh, didn't really question the details surrounding how my family came to be where they are. I mean, we were very much rooted in place. I grew up in a Mennonite community, so fairly tight knit, and my mom did a fair amount of quilting, so I resonate with Sarah on a lot of different levels. But I think there was a connectedness in my childhood to understanding that I was part of working with the land to create food, to raise animals. But then, as time went on, there was also the reality of living on a small scale farm that it's really hard work. There's a lot of labor involved, and there are a lot of histories that go back further than just the current moment. And so, as an artist and as somebody creative, especially moving back to the area after spending some time in Chicago and just becoming more aware and having the ability to research and learn about the longer history of place has been really valuable. And some of the projects that I'm taking on, I'm trying to explore that and educate myself as well as bring those stories to the forefront. So the Orchard series is one way that I'm doing that. When I moved back to the area in 2021, I was driving through some of the orchard areas up north of Leland, and I came across this orchard of where they had been cut down, and there were just these row after row after row of stumps, and that was during the pandemic, and from some of the personal change and upheaval in my own life, as well as thinking about where we were at politically and the conversations that we were having during that time, just really felt like those stumps were evocative of what was happening internally in my own life, as well as kind of on American larger conversation about the different conflicts and histories that were and still are very important to understand. And so I knew I needed to make art that connected to that sense of loss, and that sense of also resilience in the face of terrible circumstances. So there was a sense of hope also when I would see some of these trees, these stumps, sending up shoots, and those shoots blossoming and flowering, and there was just a larger story to be told there, and so that was something that I continue to try to understand and also connect back to my history of growing up on a family farm and the struggle of just trying to make it as somebody that is trying to live off the land. And I think those are all very complicated and nuanced conversations that I'm still finding the language to articulate, but I find a lot of value and meaning through being engaged in those conversations and bringing other people into them.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions for the artist? Please don't, lay back and just listen. If you, I would like to really recommend all of these people are around us. Sarah's at the Art Center. Margot's show opens at Lake Street Galleries or Center Gallery rather, in Glen Arbor. And Nick's giving a talk next Saturday on his work at Crooked Tree, which would be pretty interesting to listen to, as well as the other gentleman who's Nick Pernetta, is that his last name?
Yeah,
Who's part of this show. I want to thank you guys for sharing pretty personal and inspiring stuff for me, certainly. And I see a few smiling faces. I hope that people will take the time to look at what artists create and recognize that there's a lot coming in to each work that reflects the times as well as the individual. And I'm very grateful to the three of you for the work you do and sharing it with us. I wish we had a little more time to continue this conversation, but offline in coffee shops and galleries, perhaps we'll have that opportunity.
I would like to add one thing, and I can make it really quick. One of the things that I found, especially for myself, is that I love making protest signs. I feel like that is something I can do. And like, the more crazy my sign is, the better I feel. So if you see someone out there at any of the events, coming up with a sign that looks like they spent hours on it and probably wearing braids, come say hi to me, because I feel like finally my art school degree is getting put to really good use in a public way.